Welcome, everybody. You know, the THX AAA 789 from Massdrop was recently on sale, I think a day or two ago, and I only found out about it 6 hours after the fact. 6 hours after Zeos Pantera uploaded his video informing everybody that it was in fact available for sale. And I already have a 789, but I figured, let me see if I can get another one. And I went to the drop and it was gone. And I know exactly why. Because people sit and wait and have advanced information that this amplifier is coming out. It only comes out in a very limited quantity. So $3,500 sold, 3,500 amplifiers sold. But there were over 13,000 requests for this. You can see that right here. Look, 13,000 requests and 3,500 sold. That's how many Massdrop made. And I understand that Massdrop needs to make a buck and they only have so much processing power, and whichever company is combining their efforts with Massdrop, because I refuse to call them Drop, it can only make so many. I get that. I understand. But it's really difficult for average people like you and me who get information about this drop late, 6 hours late, to then go and try to purchase this, and it's out of stock because there are trolls out there who sit and who wait and they buy 5, 6, however many of these that they can at a particular time, however many Massdrop allows them to buy at one time. And then they go on eBay and then they sell it for double or triple the price. And it takes a long time for this amplifier to get back into the market because, look, this has happened more than once. This is, I think, the third time where this amplifier has sold out within hours of being on sale. And for people who want to experience THX AAA type of sound, where do they go? They can go to the benchmark class headphone amplifiers, which are several $1,000s. And that's unreasonable. So what's the alternative? Well, you know what? I'm sick and tired of Massdrop's nonsense. I'm sick and tired of Massdrop being so secretive about not only the products they're selling, but also secretive about when those products are coming out. It's really irritating. So you know what? We're going to go to an alternative. We are instead going to take a look at the Monolith by Monoprice desktop headphone balanced amplifier with DAC and THX AAA technology. What a wonderful name. Thank you, Monoprice. I have both of these DACs, amps. I have both of these amps, the Monolith and the 789. And I'm going to do a review. I'm going to do a review of the Monolith, and then I'm going to do a review of the 789. But along the way of doing the review of the Monolith, I think it's important for us to take a look at the similarities and the differences of the 789 and the Monolith. And that's what this video is about today. I am so peeved off, I am so irritated with trolls and with Massdrop for doing the nonsense that they've done, especially with the 789, which they know is heavily requested and wanted, being so secretive about it, hiding the ball about when it's coming on sale, only giving advance notice to a certain select group of people. It's irritating. So you know what? Let's go to the Monolith instead, which is readily available and competitively priced for everything that you get in it. So there's a couple of things we're going to do. We're going to break this down in a couple of ways. There's an unboxing video. Go watch that if you're interested. This video is really going to talk about the comparison between the 789 and the Monolith. I have a Google presentation document that we're just going to go through. And I know that sounds really boring, but that's really the only way I can do this, by summarizing my thoughts, by giving you a visual feedback about the things that are important and things that are not important. I could do a comparison of a video and show you physically what those amplifiers look like, and you'll just look at them. That's not very helpful. Instead, I think it's more helpful to have a visual guide with the presentation. So that's what we're going to do, at least for this video. As we progress through the review process of the Monolith and eventually through the review process of the 789, we're obviously going to take a look at the menu systems, the features, the functionality. But for now, let's go to my Google Doc. Monolith by Monoprice THX AAA balanced desktop amplifier. Excuse me while I drink my tea. Okay. It's a fully balanced desktop amplifier that goes obviously unsaid because it says so on their website. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean to get a fully balanced desktop amplifier? Well, if you go back to the THX 789, that is also a balanced amplifier. You see, on the back, there are balanced inputs. So if you have a balanced DAC, you can get the digital information from the computer via USB or optical, whatever, into the DAC, and the balanced DAC output, which are XLR, will go into the back of the 789. Therefore, what you will get is you'll have a balanced XLR, 4-pin balanced XLR for your headphones that have the appropriate cable. Then you get balanced sound. Well, you know what? You get the same thing with this, with the Monolith. You get a balanced out. Balanced basically means, to put it in a very quick nutshell, that the cord that contains all that electrical information, the analog information, is lessening, reducing the interference, electrical interference that is naturally around you all the time, whether it's from the current that's powering your particular amplifier, or it's another device that's next to it, your phone, for example. Cellular devices are around you, the Wi-Fi distribution network. All sorts of things are causing electrostatic distortion constantly. A lot of the devices that we use are shielded against that. There are microchips and special circuitry that reduce that interference. And then there's also software manipulation that tricks us into thinking that there is no interference or there's very little interference. Well, the problem is when you have a class-leading amplifier, an audiophile amplifier, a clean amplifier, you don't want any software mumbo-jumbo unless you specifically ask for it. You want to have the cleanest sound possible, because every time that a piece of software is trying to manipulate something to make you think there's no distortion, it's manipulating the actual signal itself. And so you're not getting the true signal path. You're not getting the true music sound that's coming from the DAC. So how do you deal with this? Well, what a balanced cord does is there's a ground, and then there's the left and the right. And what it does is it alternates the signal. So the alternating path eventually winds up and it sorts itself out into your headphone, and it cancels out the noise, the interference that is being fed into the cable. Does that kind of make sense? It's really hard for me to, because I'm not an electrician. I only know this from the research that I've done and from actual experience. When you're alternating the current back and forth, left and right, going at alternating frequency, and it ends up, you recombine the frequency into the headphone, and what happens is that any electromagnetic interference that's in one particular channel, say the left channel versus the right channel, cancels out. It's gone because it wasn't in both, and so it's not there anymore. What is in both? Well, when it's inverted and it gets reverted into the proper frequency, all the stuff that is similar in the left channel and the right channel get combined, and you get it. That's where you get the stereo. You get that. All the stuff that is not in both channels is thrown out, so to speak. I know what I said is not technically accurate, but it's the best way I can explain it. It's the best way I understand it. Does it work? Absolutely. It 100% works. And I know this for a fact for a couple of reasons. One, the microphone that I've been using, I've had a couple microphones, but every once in a while they would get this real weird buzzing and humming, and I would get really irritated until I purchased a balanced XLR. And I got the balanced XLR, plugged it into my microphone, plugged it into my PreSonus, and it's gone. I don't have that problem anymore because I have so many electrical devices around me on my table, on my desk. The XLR actually does work. The balanced XLR does work. Now, with respect to headphones, the true thing that you're getting out of it is twofold. Number one, the signal is supposed to have less interference. If you have a DAC amp that is prone to frequency degradation, prone to interference, then an XLR cable really isn't going to help you all that much. You have to have a clean DAC amp in order to get a clean signal. There's an old adage that says, garbage in, garbage out. It's an old scientific sort of terminology, which means that if you start off with garbage in your scientific analysis, then your result, now no matter how confident that you are, is going to be based upon garbage. Okay? a faulty premise, a faulty idea, is going to result in a faulty conclusion. So a faulty amplifier DAC that is prone to signal noise is going to have a faulty signal at the end when it goes to your headphone, whether or not you use an XLR cable. Now, is that going to change some of the noisiness? It might. It's certainly possible, but it's not getting you the best signal, which is why if you have the opportunity to use a fully balanced amplifier, try it. You will, I think, notice the difference between a fully balanced one and one that isn't fully balanced and prone to noise and degradation. So that's why this is important. Now, there are a couple of things about the Monolith that is vastly different from the THX, the Massdrop. There's an LCD screen on the front, and there are 2 buttons, plus the knob. That's very different from the 789 because the 789 has gain switch 1, 2, and 3, the volume, and the input selection, and the power button. Power button on and off. Input selection, you get to choose RCA or balanced. Gain 1, 2, and 3, which level of gain that you want, and then the volume. It's very, very simple. This is a darn simple amplifier to use. In contrast, the Monolith is exponentially more difficult for a number of reasons. Number one, the LCD is there so that you can navigate all the additional functions that are part of this, the DAC function, the DAC itself that's in this amplifier. And the LCD is fine. The problem is navigating the LCD. You have to use the menu and the enter input button plus the knob in combination. And it's very finicky. The menus don't really make a whole lot of sense. The manual doesn't make a whole lot of sense about what these particular options do. And when I played around with it, I don't really notice a difference between one setting and another. Now, that might be because I'm not using the setting properly. But it may also be because the setting really doesn't do anything. It might just be a gimmick, like a lot of audiophile doohickeys are. However, you do get a visual feedback of the volume. You do get a visual feedback of which input selection you've chosen. You get a visual feedback about the other functionalities of this DAC. So that's nice to have, but the LCD is only there because they have all this other functionality that can only be displayed on an LCD. It can't be displayed in a normal fashion with a knob and a couple of buttons. On the back, you have USB optical coaxial and AE 53 in, or S3, sorry, AE S3 in. And I just stick to the USB because that's the USB DAC itself that's built into it. The analog out, you have balanced in and out, left and right, plus you have unbalanced RCA out. So just be careful. If you think that you are getting balanced, you're only getting balanced through the balanced in on the XLR. You do not get balanced on the RCA. Okay? The RCA does not carry balanced signal. You also have the option of putting out RCA, which means theoretically, if you have speakers that have RCA input, you can use this DAC to send out the RCA signal. It won't be balanced, but you can send it out. Now, can you use balanced speakers? I think that does exist. I just don't know anything about speakers, so I couldn't speak to that. Speakers speak to that to any great extent. And then you have, on the left-hand side, the very left, you have the input for the power supply. And here again, we have the Massdrop version 789. Incredibly simple machine. Some might say beautiful, some might say not beautiful. But in my view, the Monolith is not particularly good looking, but, it's an amplifier. Let's talk about the real meat and potatoes of these two amplifiers. So I'm going to read off this stuff to you, and then I'm going to explain to you what this stuff means. So it's got 2 THX AAA amplification modules. It's the 788 version. It's got 2 AKM 4493 DAC modules. It's got a signal-to-noise ratio of greater than 120 decibels. It's got a Dirac sensor surround, which theoretically increases dynamic range. You may or may not be able to notice it depending on your recording and the type of headphone that you have. And total harmonic distortion is less than 0.0005%. Going to the Massdrop, there is no THX AAA amplification module. Okay? I know the Massdrop says THX AAA. I'll explain that in a moment. But there is no module in there. The THX AAA certification comes through custom circuitry. So what does that mean? So what Monolith has done is that they have licensed the actual architecture, the microchip itself, the module from THX. And they've gotten it, they've had it built for them, and then they insert it into the board of their amplifier. So it's just, think of it as a microchip that you might put into your computer. And with that in mind, 2 of those go into the Monolith. But the Massdrop doesn't have microchip. Instead, what it does is it does away with the microchip thing, and it just creates a circuitry inside the board itself. So the way that the board is laid out is, in fact, the microchip itself. Now, how does that change things? Is that better or is that worse? Well, arguably, it is better. It is better because if you look at the total harmonic distortion, it is less than the Monolith, 0.0002%. That is significantly less. Now, you might be saying, can I actually hear the difference? You probably can't hear the difference, okay? When you're talking about 0.000 something, whatever the number is, the likelihood that you can actually tell the difference between the two is very minute. But I think in sense of fairness, you have to know that yes, there is in fact a difference of the total harmonic distortion between the two. What is total harmonic distortion? It's just the amount of distortion that you get into the signal path itself as the amplifier is receiving the signal, whether it's from the computer or it's from another dedicated DAC, and then it's being sent out to the headphones. The amount of distortion that actually enters into the chain of signal, the signal path itself, which is totally normal. It happens to everything because we're talking about electrons and bits and wires and all sorts of other atmospheric things. Distortion happens. And this is very, very clean for both amplifiers. The THX from Massdrop, the THX from Massdrop does not have any sort of sense around gimmicky thing. It's only an amplifier. The sense around thing is really about the DAC that's built into the Monolith. The Massdrop version does not have a DAC. There's no USB connection on the back. You want to connect this thing, you got to connect it through an RCA cable from your computer, or you have to get an RCA cable or balanced XLR from a dedicated DAC. That's the only way this thing is going to work. Okay? Now, if you have a digital audio player, excuse me, if you have a digital audio player, a DAP, you can get, probably, very likely, you can get an RCA cable that's compatible with your player and then plug that into the amplifier and use your player as the DAC and then plug in your headphones into the amplifier unit itself. That's totally possible. You can do that. But that differentiates, that's the first huge difference between the Monolith and the Massdrop. It's the lack of the DAC in the Massdrop and the inclusion of the DAC in the Monolith. Now let's talk about the DAC real quick. The AK4493 is the newest version of the AK DAC module that's been released. So the 4493 replaced the 4490 that was back in January 2018, I think. Just about January 2018. So that's the newest version that's available. And so Monolith went and put it in there. We'll talk more about that in a few moments. What else is different? What about the two THX 788 application modules versus just the circuitry inside the Massdrop? What's the difference? Well, funny enough, there might actually be a difference. Only if you are superhuman able, if you have superhuman powers to tell the difference. What does the two amplification modules provide? Well, that's this crazy thing. I have no idea. I don't know, besides the marketing nonsense, what does the two amplification modules provide? Is it greater bandwidth? Is it greater harmonics? Less distortion? Well, if it's less distortion, then, the signal to, not the signal, but the total harmonic distortion is going to show you that's not necessarily the case, right? 0.0005% compared to 0.0002%. If that's what it is. And I don't know if that's what it is. The two module implementation has to have been for a particular reason. Because I can't imagine Monolith going out of their way and spending more money than they actually have to insert another module. They probably thought that having two modules increases the clarity of the sound that's coming through. If that's the case, I don't think I've noticed it. In my usage, I haven't noticed it at all. The difference between the sound quality of the Monolith versus the sound quality of the Massdrop. Perhaps there is some difference, but to my ears, I can't tell. Let's understand THX AAA. It's proprietary THX technology. AAA means achromatic audio amplifier. That's the AAA involved, AAA. What does that mean? Low distortion, high fidelity, low noise. There's no colorization of the signal. What does colorization mean? Well, it could mean a couple of things. One, that the noise that's included into the signal path itself would color the sound. There's no toning to the sound, meaning it's not warm sound or it's not steely sound, it's not cold sound, it's just neutral as you can get. That's what THX AAA is really for. Give you the most neutral sound representation, meaning you get the sound that's actually coming out of the audio file itself. It's also supposed to be low power consumption, which is why now you're starting to see, at least in the new AAA technology, the AAA modules inserted into, for example, the Q5 module, which should be released sometime, hopefully soon. And also in the the Monolith THX AAA portable device that also has this particular module type in there. And so what the module does, it's because it's low power consumption, it can actually work off of portables. And THX AAA is used for benchmark audio setups. But this doesn't mean just because it has a THX logo on it that this is the same thing as a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 amplifier that's in studios. That's not what it is. It gets you very close for the price. The total signal-to-noise ratio and harmonic distortion in the much more pricey units is going to be less, and there's going to be additional circuitry and additional features involved in those much, much, much more expensive amplifiers that are not included in the $350 Massdrop. I keep getting those two mixed up, the Massdrop or the basically $480 Monolith. But it gets you very close. Let's talk about the DAC. It's, as I said, the newest chipset from AKM. It's 32-bit audio processing, capable of up to 6 filters. So what does that mean? So what the AKM chip actually does is you can pre-select, if not you, I'm talking about you as in the person, the company that licenses the chip itself, can designate 3 different types of filters. So it can be a low noise filter, it could be a high noise filter, it could be a low frequency filter, it could be a high frequency filter, it could be, a filter to cut off a particular range across the board, right? You have a full cutoff at a particular hertz. And you could do whatever you want with these particular filters, and you can have it pre-programmed inside the DAC, and you can send it out, and that's why if you hit filter 1, filter 2, filter 3, filter 4, that's what the filters are basically doing. It's cutting out and increasing or decreasing or completely negating a particular frequency path, a frequency response. But just because just because this particular chip has that capability, doesn't mean that it's in the chip, in the amplifier that you get, because the manufacturer of the actual amplifier that's using this DAC chip can opt not to have the 6 filters, can opt to have only a few of the 6 filters, and can in fact change the filter parameters if they wanted to, what the filters actually do. This is also DSD capable, and has low noise and low distortion, which is very beneficial. Now, when you're out getting a DAC for the from the Massdrop, when you're out getting a DAC for a Massdrop amplifier, you got to make sure you get an amplifier. You got to make sure you get a DAC that is low noise, low distortion, and neutral. If you buy a DAC that has a colored sound to it, for example, Violectric, I love their DAC and amps, but they have kind of a warmer tone to it. If you get Cambridge Audio DACs, they're fantastic DACs, but they do have a warmer, slightly warmer tone. Some of their other products have a slightly colder tone, but it's not neutral. If you want to buy the Massdrop or the Monolith, you are trying to get neutral signal. You don't want anything interfering from what the song is supposed to sound like. So you definitely don't want to introduce any colorization in the DAC, because that colorization is going to transfer over to the amplifier. All it's doing, it's getting that signal. It's not altering it from the DAC and sending it out to you. So you got to make sure that the DAC itself is as neutral as you can possibly get it. Hence the 4493. Now, in real-world testing, between back and forth, and again, this is not the conclusion, this is just the beginning, so we can start understanding what these DACs and amps and all these features are going to involve. Here's the real-world stuff here regarding the Monolith. The DAC chipset is a convenience. It's nice to have. If you are just now getting into amplifiers and headphones and all that stuff, should this be your very first amplifier purchase? Yes. Yes, it should be. Because look, if you have the money to do it and you're not strapped for under $100, but you have something to spend, you have a good pair of headphones and you really do want to spend less than $500, which will get you great, phenomenal amplifiers, then the Monolith is an excellent choice because you get the DAC and you get the amplifier, a very good set of both. The other thing and I know I put it into the con section, but it's not really a con. It's more of, it's kind of there just to sell. But the way that they've done it, they have to be rewarded. They did put in the most recent AKM chip, the 4493, which is supposed to be particularly neutral, which is supposed to be low noise, low distortion. So they're at least marrying the AAA 788 chipset to a DAC chipset that is also particularly neutral. Now imagine if they had put in a Wolfson DAC chip. Now, if you go online, you'll hear a lot about Wolfson, which Wolfson's supposed to have this warmer tonality to it and blah, 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 whatever. If they had done something like that, if they had cheaped out and purchased something, licensed something from 10 years ago, then you could have said, boy, this was a bad decision. There's no reason why you should ever use the DAC inside this amplifier if you want true neutral sound. That might be true. But with the implementation of the 4493 from AKM, Monolith is basically saying, okay, we're doubling down on this whole neutrality thing. We're going to give you the best DAC chip that we can afford to put in here with the newest implementation from AKM, and we're putting in the AAA. So that shows you that Monolith is pretty serious about this thing. They could have saved themselves some money, not put in the DAC chipset at all, and they would have been competing with the Massdrop, and they would have been competing with the Massdrop when it's no longer available. And so people's only alternative would be to go to the Monolith or wait for months and months and hope that you are among the first 3,500 that are able to purchase the Massdrop version. Okay? The menu system is clunky and unintuitive, and I've tried over and over again to try to understand what's going on with the menu system. It's over my head. The manual that comes with the amplifier is not particularly helpful. The miniature buttons control everything, and because they flank the knob, it's sometimes difficult to press them, and sometimes the knob gets in the way. If you have big fingers, that's going to be a problem. If you have skinny fingers, it's not going to be a problem. But really, the implementation of the menu system was very poorly done. What could have been better and should have been done is to put in a remote. There is no remote option on this. So you can't even use a remote if you have a universal remote somewhere. It doesn't have any ability to use a remote. A remote would have been helpful with the menu system. Finally, the volume change with the knob has significant delay. Now, if you've seen any of my videos and if you've seen me, messing around with the Monolith, turning the volume, you may have noticed that I turn the volume and it takes a couple of seconds for the volume decibels to start moving one way or the other. And that's just consistent. And I don't know why it does that. It's either because the knob itself is not registering quickly enough with the circuitry, or the circuitry is just bogged down, right? There's something wrong with it. Does the volume change? It does change. There are small steps to the change. And I wish I could increase the turning movement, the increase in the volume change. Perhaps there's a menu in there to do that somewhere. I just have to find it. But because it's so unintuitive and clunky, it's hard to do. Now let's go to the pros. The sound is clear and clean. I can't tell the difference between the Monolith and the Massdrop. As I've said before, I have both of them, one on top of the other. And I've listened to them, one after the other. And I can tell you that whatever difference there is between the two is so minute that I can't tell the difference. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not there. It certainly might be there. It's entirely possible that one sounds slightly better than the other. But is it enough for me to say, definitely do not consider this one, consider the other amplifier? No, it's not. You get balanced XLR input and output, which is a must, obviously, if you're going to compete with the Massdrop version. It can drive headphones up to 600 ohms, which is great. It has very quick startup time. It's very small, and the size is basically the same size as the Massdrop. It's maybe half an inch wider than the Massdrop version. But other than that, it's basically the same size. And it's competitively affordable. So the Massdrop is sold for about $350 when you can find it on their website. You go on eBay, it's $700 or higher. The Monolith is $480. What are you paying that additional, say, $100 for? For the DAC. And you know what? Even though I put it in the con section, and even though I said it's a convenience, if you don't have a DAC that's dedicated, if you don't have a balanced DAC, this is what you should get. Then it's absolutely fantastic. Now here's the thing. Getting a dedicated balanced DAC might be an upgrade in the future for you, in which case you could look at the SMSL SU8, which is a great balanced DAC. Or you can just use the DAC chipset that's already in this particular system. But you have options, whereas with the Massdrop, you have to spend extra money to get that balanced DAC. You have no choice. Now, if we do a brief comparison between the 789 and the Monolith, there's a slight difference in clarity between the Massdrop and Monolith. Massdrop is slightly clearer, but only in certain songs. And it's just for the briefest moments where I think maybe it's clear, maybe it's not clear. And I really can't tell. I figured I should just let you know that I hear every once in a while some sort of clarity, but it's gone. It's almost as if it didn't exist. And maybe in my imagination, it might be a particular portion of the song that I listened to. Who knows what it was? It might be a slight difference in the volume settings. I don't know. But every once in a while it happened, but it wasn't consistent by any measure. The LCD display on the Monolith provides no listening benefit whatsoever. It's just there for kicks because you got to use the menu system. The Massdrop is far more intuitive out of its simplicity because you only have those buttons and knobs. Size is practically the same. Power output is comparable. So, purchasing decision. Once again, this is not the final conclusion, but if you're interested in the 789 versus the Monolith, here's the breakdown. $480 compared to $350 if you can find it on Massdrop. If not, then you're looking at $700 at least on eBay. You get a DAC that's built in. It's readily available. It's, you can only get higher quality amplifiers, DACs, at significantly higher prices. What do I think of all of this? Well, I think that if you're in the market to get a THX qualified amplifier, you only have these two options that are reasonable. I would submit to you that spending $1,000 on the 789 from Massdrop is not reasonable. But I would also submit that spending $480 on the Monolith is not the worst thing in the world. Because you get the DAC, you get the similar amplification, you get balanced inputs and outputs, you get a menu system, and you have a device that practically sounds the same as the 789. And it's available now. And there's a return policy. And there's a warranty. So you make the call. This does not mean, this slideshow, this video does not mean that you should go out and buy right now the Monolith. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm telling you is, if you are itching to go purchase the 789 from eBay for $800, $900, you may want to hold off on that. That's not money well spent, because you got to add all this other stuff on top. You got to add the balanced stack. The SMSO, I think, costs $300, something like that. And then you got to get the XLR cables that are balanced. Remember to do that, otherwise it's not going to help. So there's additional cost to the 789. And if you've already spent double what the 789 originally cost, and now you're spending an additional $200 to $300 more on a DAC, you may not be making the wisest purchasing decision at that point. But if you already have a balanced DAC and you really want the 789, well, that's your call. You do what you got to do. You do what you feel is right. Hopefully this has been a helpful introductory video on the Monolith. There's a lot of stuff here. A lot of the stuff I got from the research notes that are linked to the Google document here. And so you can go and look at it. The Audio Science Review actually does a very, very good job of breaking down the measurements of both the 789 and of the Monolith. So take a look at that. And ultimately, the conclusion from Audio Science Review is that they're both recommended. Audio Science loves the 789, but they also like the Monolith because of their great similarity between the two. And that's my ultimate conclusion to this video, is that they're very similar in sound quality. Perhaps not similar in the way that they've implemented some of the things, but the sound quality is really, really hard to distinguish between the two. Hopefully this has been of some help, and we're going to continue the LCD2 review and eventual conclusion, which is going to come up very quickly. Then we're going to dovetail into further reviews of the Monolith THX AAA, and then new stuff that's going to come and we're going to talk about. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I will talk to you next time.